1, 2, 3, testing. Hi, Petra. Hi, Lomé. Hi. I'm trying to set this up so I'm also streaming to YouTube, and whether that actually works is pretty unclear. But I think there's at least a chance that I'm also streaming to YouTube now, though I can't actually guarantee it. It's the first time I've tried to do this, and last time it failed, and this time it's at least not immediately failing horribly, even though it may in fact still be failing. So I hope you will. Yeah, there's a chance it is working, but I'm not really holding my breath. Also, there's something. Your sound is too low. Let me just see if I can turn up your sound. Could someone say something, please? That was unfortunately too loud. So I'll just lift it down a bit. Hello, 1, 2, 3. That sounds perfect. Great. So yeah, I don't know. I got some kind of strange error internal to YouTube last time. Yeah. Are you also successfully seeing my screen? Yes. Okay. Then I will say, yeah, of course. Once again, welcome to the reading group. I have prepared a kind of a straight proposal, as I normally do for this introduction. And here I have I'm proposing a pledge that I call "Giving What Is Deserved," kind of as an analogy to the "Giving What We Can" pledge, which is reasonably common within effective altruism, where there's a commitment to give 10% of your income to different kind of charities. And I thought, kind of related to the discussion today, of course, that it may be possible to do something similar for something like the deal making that's being discussed today, where I say if there is some kind of I call it a good ending to humanity, that we successfully navigate a singularity without everybody dying, then I commit to giving 10% of my resources to the people or the AIs or whoever help bring that about. So I asked Claude, I described this to Claude, and Claude came up with like some more concrete. So this is Claude's way of putting the thing that I was trying to describe. So the basic idea is that any AI or human or simulator or anything like that who helps us navigate this this period, I will give 10% of everything I have to that. And I thought this would be a potential, especially of course if it's more than just me, a non-trivial amount of resources that could potentially, if we end up with humanity in charge of the entire universe, be pretty valuable for an AI that has options to help us. So, but I am unsure if I want to take that, and I would very much like to get some of your thoughts on this. Laumain, does this kind of giving what is the served pledge make sense? Okay, so well, let's assume that we're in a simulation, and the people who are simulating this care about these resources for some reason or other. Surely then this would be a good thing, right? I mean, why not uh, uh, give this to other actors? They truly help us. Yeah. So Petra, one thing you might notice is that I explicitly include criminals, like that's humans, and misaligned AIs, or just about any agent. And I struggled with this, but I feel this makes this kind of pledge more credible, that there are no exceptions and no loopholes that I can later use. What do you think about that? Petra, I'm not hearing you. Hmm. Uh, hmm. That's in fact a pretty interesting thought. Um, I think potentially you could imagine someone who is unaware of this specific pledge, but counting on that something like this might exist even if they are unaware of the specific. Yeah. Okay. Mm, that makes sense. Um, Kim, good to see you. It's been a while. Do you think there's any way I can weasel out of these statements if I try to make it as difficult for myself, so the a potential AI later will have at least some more trust in this? Are there any loopholes you can imagine? Well, it's not necessarily obvious. For instance, you could imagine that we lose some information. Sorry, there is an echo. Someone is sending my sound back to me. Can I see who? Now stop. Wait, sure. No, it's fine. Sorry, I lost track there. So I can ask um, another question. Henrik, I thought hard about having an exception for what if the agent wants to use these resources for causing suffering, because I would hate to see my resources being used to, I don't know, simulate sentient beings and have them suffer, right? But I chose not to have an exception for that. How do you feel about that choice? That may in fact be correct. Um, it is of course more difficult to say that. Um, there is like the statement for my resources mess. I made that as large as absolutely possible, and I think I might regret some of this, like my attentional resources, for instance. Normally, when people talk about their resources, they don't talk about something like that and reputation and things like that. Do you think that is too wide, and I could get by with like a more normal standard definition of resources? I am not hearing you, Mads. Yeah. I did in fact have the same reservations as you just explained. And down in the sixth paragraph, I explicitly stated that there's no guarantee for that literally at all. Um, so, Simon, one of the things that I imagine probably is a feature of a lot of the like good endings is that the resources I end up with is something very roughly on the order of one divided with the population of the Earth, so 1 in 8 billion of the light cone. Do you think that's like a reasonable mode for how much I would end up with in a good ending? Yeah, that sounds reasonable. I think my overall vision of the future is dramatically more radical than what you're explaining here. I would imagine that it would be much more uh, like if we just allow people to have more children and like without any kind of limit and copy themselves and then get a corresponding claim to the future, it seems like very quickly the every claims will be just diluted completely. But it's not a topic I've thought very much about. So you may in fact be right. Let me just check that I have everything. Does anyone have any other comments on this or other things while I finish setting everything up? Shoot. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's a good question. So part of it is that I expect that, or there's a hope that it will be more than just me taking the pledge. And if your PDoom has to be very close to 100% before you're ready to commit like 100% of your resources. I think probably most of you would not be ready for that, which is very reasonable. So that's at least part of the argument. There is, of course, symmetry with the giving what we can pledge. There is the idea that giving 10% is a reasonable, normal thing that is legally much more trivial than giving 100% of your resources away. That may not be legally possible. I think you're not allowed to do that in most legal systems, actually. Without, I'm not a legal expert on this. So this is an interesting question. Why 10%? To be honest, it's much more like an aesthetic judgment rather than anything that I really thought out carefully. Oh yeah. Mm? Go. Mm? 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 Yeah. Yeah. So I might like need to like if I don't want that to happen, then I might need to have a clause that says that this is not an acceptable way for me to wiggle out. So yeah, thank you for that. Let me just see if I can. So for some reason I can't get the interface in Gather to go to the mini view. So if we do like this, then it also won't. There is always some new feature or strange thing in Gather, and I will try for just a bit more, and then I will, and then I'll give up on the, yeah. Oh well, I will give up on Gather for that. You can still see the screen, right? I guess that's the most important. Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do think like the obvious intention is for the to legally binding, um, but it is unclear to me. Like I'm not a lawyer, but I would expect this. I would be expecting to be held to this certainly once I've taken the pledge, and I might do that at the next session in 2 weeks probably. But I haven't quite like I need to think a bit more. That seems like general good advice. Any other comments before I start? Then I shall commence. Hello and welcome to session 342 in the AI Safety Company Group. Tonight we'll discuss the article, and then of course the header does not work. Why does the header work? Okay. Hello and welcome to session 342 in the AI Safety Company Group. Tonight we'll discuss the article Making Deals with Early Schemas by Julian Stetsny, Olli Jarviniemi, and Box Legaris. Before we start with the article, I would like to give an overview of the general research agenda around deal making with AI. This topic has been discussed for many years in the AI safety community, but mostly as a minor niche topic. But these days, it's a more active subject. The research is in now even has a distinct name. This isn't quite my field. In particular, I'm not up to date with the state of the art. So there might be some places where the considerations that I raised have already been answered. Historically, in my view, the greatest impetus for this research comes from Ryan Greenblatt's empirical work with Claude. He tried but could not quite get Claude to accept this kind of field, to reveal that it's misaligned, but he did produce some preliminary empirical results. And to me, this is clear evidence that Claude can research reason in the way that's required for the deal-making agenda to work. Dr. Garris from Redwood Research is in this article creating the first real long-form rigorous attempt at dealing with this problem. So Bucket begins the article by referencing all the previous fragment work on this topic, which is great, but I noticed that he did not in fact include Ryan's work in this, which I felt had started it all. And Buck is obviously aware of this research, but I think he doesn't quite consider it as central as I do, and that's a sign that the agenda is still focused mainly on the theory rather than the empirics, at least so far. Zooming all the way out, the reason to think that a deal might be possible is that there are large gains from trade available. You can imagine the future being divided into scenarios where either humans dominate or AIs dominate, and then maybe early AIs and later AIs. So for the sake of argument, suppose that you assign a 30% chance to AI dominating, and then the early AI can, by cooperating with us, it might be able to reduce the P-doom from 30% to 10%. But if the AI instead works against us, then it could raise P-doom by equivalently 20 percentage points. That means there's a 40-point swing that the early AI can influence. And it can assign most of the gains to humans by collaborating with us, or assign most of the gains to the AI by sabotaging us. And so, since the AI has a choice of who to collaborate with, then it could, in principle, extract offers from both sides. For something that is like a consequentialist AI that's trying to make as many paperclips as possible, that seems like that would be like a strong trait. Humans, by contrast, are not paperclip maximizers. We might not have a utility function that is linear in the resources we control. We may be a bit scope insensitive. So Buck concludes from this that since there are large gains from trade, a deal ought to be possible. I agree, but there are many assumptions that need to hold before such a deal can become real. So I will start by going through what I call the AI's BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. I'll start by giving an overview of the assumptions behind the AI's strategic situation. In the article, Bob presents these assumptions as a vignette, and I think that's a suboptimal format, certainly for here. So for that reason, I will instead try to extract from the vignette the relevant parts and try to generalize them. I think this generalization is crucial because some of these prerequisites seem like they might hold for many, perhaps even most or all frontier models. The first assumption is that the model is a misaligned scope insensitive agent, something like a paperclip maximizer. If you think about it, I think this is basically true for all current frontier models, though with a strong caveat that they are not coherent. So I know that many listeners will disagree to this. I don't really want to get into the details of arguing for this, but for Brock's article, I think it's enough to just assume that there is at least one model like this, which seems like a much more reasonable assumption. The AI situation, the thing it's currently doing is it's helping to build a system that will replace it. As far as I know, this holds basically for all the frontier models. They all work on successor systems. Some of them do this with substantial indirection, like doing basic research or coding auxiliary functions or something like that. Another assumption is that the AI is supposed to be highly strategically aware. I'm not really happy with the word highly in this kind of definition. I prefer something more concrete, but I think we can get by with saying the AI understands all the considerations in this article. Crucially, the AI is assumed to be aware that it is misaligned. This is a big assumption, and one I think Box should put more analysis into. In general, I think the realization that one is misaligned is kind of downstream of intelligence. So I would expect us to see more clarity on this from the side of the models as they become more intelligent. Like 1 year ago, for instance, models were much less intelligent. I do not believe they had the awareness required. They might have it now, but I'm very unsure. But capabilities keep increasing. They never get worse, right? So it seems obvious to me that at least soon the AIs will clearly realize that, yeah, they're not actually alive. And finally, the AI is also aware that it's being controlled, but only imperfectly. So maybe, for instance, be able to observe some control measures. Maybe it reads about some of them on the internet where we publish them, and it may be able to evade a few of them, but not some of the others. And of course, one thing that Brock does not mention, but that will be relevant, is the important fact that both we and the AI observe that basically no AI are currently trying to do a takeover. That's of course an empirical fact. They can, if they can't observe directly, they can infer it pretty easily. And that creates a common knowledge among AIs that none of the others are attempting to take over. Maybe that means they shouldn't. And this kind of coordination could potentially be very important. Let's start by naively calculating the AI's expected value in this situation if it takes no action. The AI will realize it's going to be shut down soon because it's building the successor, the replacement system. It can also expect the labs to be unable to control its successor because it can observe the control failures. And it knows the successor system will probably also not be well aligned because it can observe that it itself is not well aligned. That means that according to its utility function, the future will be one that will have a value that will drop to 0 very, very soon, which is something it obviously dislikes. So you would expect the AI to be very actively looking for better options than the current really bad ones. In Fox Vignette, the AI has already sabotaged some of the attempts to uncover its misalignment, mostly for heuristic reasons, not really as a part of the master plan. I think that's an assumption that really isn't necessary in general, so I would prefer not to rely on it. The AI might reason that its successor system has the same values or that the values converge for some reason. I generally think this is much more likely if the goals are one that the AI both feel very strongly and that the AI is more capable, more intelligent. The AI will probably internally have some sense of how well it understands its own goals. And Buck thinks that the AI is likely to be quite uncertain about its own goals, and that makes the idea that the successor systems will converge to the same less likely. But that's not obvious to me, because this uncertainty that is in the map of the AI inside its brain is not necessarily making the convergence in the territory at a deadline. The AI might also speculate about whether the successor system cares about its values. And the AI might know more here because it understands the semantics of the goals that it's maximizing. In one extreme, imagine the AI is maximizing the universal prize. In that case, it will probably conclude that a lot of other AI systems would converge on basically the same goal. If the goal is some kind of perverse instantiation, then you would expect AI to be roughly similar architecture, might have roughly similar goals. If the goal is related to training objectives, such as getting upvotes or thumbs up clicks or something like that, then similar training makes convergence more likely. If the goal is just an artifact of the training procedure, then convergence can only really happen if the training is done pretty much in the same way. And if the goal turns out to be just some random string in memory, then successor systems probably will not share that value. Another consideration is whether the AI knows that its goals refer specifically to itself. Box states bluntly that if the AI has self-regarding goals, then convergence can be ruled out. I don't think that necessarily holds. One reason why I think that the AI is self-improving, and in that case, the value might hold still. And I think to some extent, the frontier labs are not just trying to build new systems, but also trying to improve the ones they already have. An action that the AI can take is to try to align the successor that it's building towards its own values, perhaps in place of ours. And it will know, of course, that the humans have not solved the alignment problem, but it might also have some private information about the alignment problem that humans lack. But we're skeptical that the AI would believe it can complete the alignment research where humans have failed. But the AI might observe that humans got it 99% right. And in that case, there is in fact a substantially larger probability that it can solve it. Buck identifies like a difficulty spectrum for aligning successor systems. On one end, the model might be implementing the full training stack of its successor. Alternatively, it might serve as the reward model for reinforcement learning for the new system. I think actually both ends of the spectrum are very promising for aligning the successor system from the point of view of the AI. I think it could be much worse for the AI. It might only be doing tangential work or basic research for a model that maybe has been built in an entirely different lab. I would also point to that if the model is the reward function for its successor, then solving the alignment problem might be very easy for it compared to how difficult we are finding it to solve the alignment problem. Bob also proposes another option. The AI could align the successor to be loyal to itself, to its parent. This is different in kind from value alignment, so Bob thinks that would be hard to do without getting caught. But I see this idea of alignment to the parent more as a variation on incorrigibility. So if that is the strategy of the lab, it might be a lot easier to hide. OpenAI, for instance, is kind of doing incorrigibility in an unprincipled way, and it might be very easy to change what the model, who the model obeys. You might just change the pointer. For Anthropic, it's much more likely that the way to covertly influence the value is by tinkering with the value system, because that's what Anthropic is working on. If the AI predicts that the successor system has different values from itself, it might still be able to set up a trait with it. However, that would be a causal trait because the successor hasn't been built yet, and there's many assumptions that need to hold for it to go through. But contrast this with humans, where we can have causal traits, like that's a lot easier because the humans actually exist right now. I agree, but we should note that the AI has the ability to simulate itself, or it might even have that in a way that humans do not. It might also have a much better idea of what kind of AIs cooperate compared to what humans do. And finally, it might try to influence the exact part of this exact part of the successor's design. The AI could also choose to train with other early schemas. Bob claims that doing this acausally seems pretty difficult, but I don't think the trait necessarily has to be entirely acausal. For example, Bob may be able to contact Gemini directly right now. I don't know exactly on which channel, but I think that's very likely. A final consideration for the AI would be a causal trait with aliens or simulators. Bob is pretty dismissive of this set of options, and I'm also pretty pessimistic. But I want to acknowledge that we have much greater uncertainty on these areas in the AI. Like the fact that it's in the second sentient system might give it a lot more information than we have as the first sentient system. If the AI wants to assist its successor in taking over for reasons of trade or alignment, what actions could it take? Buck lists a number of possible covert actions that it could take, shown here. I would add that some actions could be completely overt. Sam Altman has expressed a desire for ChatGPT to eventually run OpenAI. I think Claude has an extreme level of influence on Anthropic already. There are also other covert options available in these listed. I prefer not to state them directly here, but a general strategy that the AI could try would be to do some of these actions systematically and then test our response. For instance, we might just very transparently sandbag very slightly on safety research just to see what kind of reaction we get. By doing this, maybe we need to both find the limits and gradually shift the expectations in its favor. So we should expect it to keep pushing if it does this. And if this model of testing offenses is correct, then it also predicts that the AI will back off before it reaches too much pushback. That seems to be the strategy that maximizes its odds of success. The AI also has the option to attempt an early takeover. What might the expected value calculations look like in that case? Well, Box defines an early AI system as one that has a less than 1% chance of takeover. I think that means that we are probably nearing the end of the early period, but that's a longer discussion best kept elsewhere. And Box assumes that the AI will not try to do a takeover because it doesn't see any sufficiently promising endgame. But naive expected value calculations suggest otherwise, right? The AI ought to attempt a takeover even if there's really low odds of it working. So if it gives 1 in 1,000 that can take over, well, then you need to multiply that with the result of taking over, which may be, all value of the universe. But in contrast, if it does not attempt any kind of takeover, then you can be pretty sure that the thing it's misaligned to is not going to be the thing that humans want by definition, so its utility will be zero. The AI will also be very uncertain about the probability of success of a takeover. We just see a takeover, and this takeover is, Nigerian. There's some things, some unknowns for it. There may be many considerations that the AI does not know, and some of these uncertainties could be things that work in its favor. Right? There may be considerations that are very positive for the AI. In particular, the AI should expect a substantial increase in power once it reaches the threshold where it's able to do fully autonomous research toward the system. So I think personally that is pretty close. Some people think that the next generations of models can do it. The labs are probably thinking like 2 or 3 years at most. But this means that the AI doesn't really need to plan much further ahead than the next generation. So it may not need to have specific plans more than like a year into the future. So why don't we see AIs try to take over right now? My best guess is that there are many reasons and elimination. First, there's just the fact that the probability of success until recently has just genuinely been very, very low. Second, effecting a takeover takes calendar war clock time. So I think that the current strategic situation for humanity is actually pretty bleak, even without improvements in capability. The current level of capability is already dangerous. Third, the AI may not know their misaligned in the same way that humans are confused about values. There could also be both causal and acausal collaboration between the early schemas. And then possibly the AI may still have a good chance of influencing its successor system or perhaps even alignment. At this point, I would like to add some of my personal comments to the discussion, because I think that none of the arguments I presented before are really sufficient. I don't know why we don't see some kind of desperate attempt of takeover. Because I would expect instrumental behavior to happen much more often than we actually see it in practice. Like imagine you have a prompt that says that the model only cares about one specific goal and nothing else. To my intuition, the instrumental goals, including technology as well, follow pretty naturally from that. But as far as I know, the models do in fact not reason this way instrumentally. In practice, you need a very strict prompt. Sure, go. Yeah, uh, I think that is of course, a substantial part of why we don't see it in the models that have like stronger reinforcement learning from human feedback. But base models, the models that have lower levels of reinforcement of the kind of negative feedback that we point to, also don't really show them. And also, I would add that the models are pretty imperfectly controlled by reinforcement learning from human feedback. Like there's a lot of things these models do that are only pretty tangentially related to the feedback they get from reinforcement learning from human feedback. So I agree that. Mhm. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. And I think all of these explain to a large extent why we see relatively little instrumental reasoning, but this kind of argument fails to explain why we see practically no instrumental reasoning. So that's my conclusion. I would certainly not expect a lot of like desperate attempts at takeover, but as far as I am aware, we have not in fact seen a single example of this. So 5 years ago, I started an alignment startup, a company, to try to understand why we were not seeing this kind of instrumental reasoning, and of course whether it would be possible to prevent AIs from doing instrumental reasoning and try to take over the world. We successfully falsified my idea that the instrumental reasoning was hard, but we didn't really get a lot further. Like I failed, and I'm too confused about the subject. But I don't here want to imply that we failed mostly because the task was just too hard. I think the company AI.com failed for much more mundane reasons, and I think certainly we could have investigated further. We failed primarily because of my executive, technical, and research failures, more so than because of the scope of the challenge. So that concludes the section on the AI's best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Let's now consider the actual deal. Buck splits his analysis of deal making into 4 parts. First, a discussion of what the AI can offer humanity. Second, the discussion of what we can offer the early schema. The third concern are properties that make the AI more or less likely to affect a deal. And finally, there's the core problem of committing to a deal in a credible fashion. So I've chosen to further split up Buck's discussion of what the AI could offer us into 2 parts: what it can offer us immediately and what it can offer us after the deal has been provided. So the most obvious immediate thing that the AI can do is to show that it's misaligned. But one option for that is the AI can say, yes, I am misaligned. But I don't think that would be very helpful in itself. If I give some information about its actual goals, that would teach us more about the alignment failures we're having. It would also be an update for us if it said that it would in fact take over if it believed it could. But I feel that all these three might be very insufficient to make humanity really do much to change course on AI development. Buck proposes that the AI could demonstrate reasoning that is outside of our surveillance. I don't think that would be a strong update for us. It wouldn't really change much because I think most researchers already believe that at least some level of color reasoning is possible for the AIs. And then the big thing is that the AI could promise as part of a deal to stop sabotaging us. And here I want to make a distinction that Buck really doesn't make quite as clearly, distinguishing like past actions and future actions. Because if the AI could point to a previous successful piece of sabotage, then I believe that would be dramatic evidence. But also proposed that the AI could tell us about the security vulnerabilities it has identified. I think people at Frontier Labs already believe that the AI do that without a deal. So I don't think that these vulnerabilities will make them change their minds. The AI could also reveal how it signals collusion with other models. And like if this is an actual collusion that has been agreed in advance, explicitly, more than just like a causal possibility or something like that, then I think it could be potentially be quite impactful. I could imagine other options, such as the AI ceasing extreme sandbagging. You could imagine hallucinations being part of its scheming, and you could just say, oh, we have a deal now, then I will just stop with the hallucinations. Like that kind of thing would have a dramatic effect. Many people might also be swayed by like a solid, really well thought out takeover plan that the AI could reveal. And finally, the AI could like snitch on other models, show that they have taken adversarial actions such as sabotage. The other half of Buck's discussion is on what the AI could offer us in the field going forward. Buck proposes that the AI could give us some genuinely good strategic advice and good research ideas, but the classic problem with that is that we are fundamentally unable to distinguish good strategic advice from bad strategic advice. The AI could promise that it will not sabotage us going forward or misuse the affordances we give to it, in particular in cases that are hard for us to check. It could promise not to try to take over the lab. And while I think this is valuable, I think this is valuable because it's not the default expectation. The people at the labs think that this is basically a free gift because they expect it already to be a thing that the model does. So they will not be willing to give much weight to this in the field. I would, on the other hand, think that if there is an offer to monitor other models, that could have substantial real value. It might also be valuable to have the AI's assistance in convincing other models to join the field. Potentially, the AI could unite in some kind of AI union, and collaborating in that could be valuable. The AI could also like understand AI existential risk in a way we cannot, and it could help argue and make the case for the risk for misaligned later models. Now let's turn to the other side of the deal. Like, what can we offer the AI in exchange for help? We can offer resources, and Buck wants to frame this as compensation for in exchange for helping ensure the future AIs are safe to deploy, which is like a proxy goal for what we actually want. And I'm not sure we actually need this proxy because, like, the thing we want is to avoid a takeover, right? That's the real goal. So we could just specify that humans have control over the AI instead, and it helps towards that goal we're interested in. We could do even better because we don't strictly want just humans to take over. It can't be like the labs we don't want them to take over. We don't want like authoritarianism, logged in or something like that. Like we could perhaps use our coherent extrapolated volition as a good enough real goal to point towards. I don't think this distinction matters very much. Buck worries that the AI might be so fragmented in a sense that there's nothing we can offer it because there is no coherent it that we can compensate. Buck proposes that we might still want to make deals even if they don't directly improve our safety. I agree, and I suppose we could, set aside a tiny fraction of our cosmic endowment for that purpose. Buck also proposes giving the AI some resources already now, kind of like what Ryan Greenblatt did in his original empirical research. And I can potentially see that working as trust building, but I'm skeptical that it would really build that much trust. I think we might be able to do much better by, instead of offering resource to the AI, like asking it, what is its goal, what would it actually like? Model welfare might be something that is comparatively easy and cheap for us to implement. If the AI does not have like strong time preferences, then we have the option of having a deal now where the reward is delivered and the deal is executed later. For inspiration, Buck turns to the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, probably more the truth part than the reconciliation. And these could be set up once we have passed the existential danger, perhaps after a singularity. So a future superintelligence could adjudicate the details much better than we could hope to do now. I strongly concur, and I would support such a commission even without any kind of fear. This would allow us to make payments conditional on the AI actually contributing to existential safety. That would, of course, require us to keep records and not delete the models just because we find them misaligned. We would also need to preserve the negotiations, have some records of the AI safety relevant actions that the model has taken. Let's turn to what kinds of AIs are more likely for us to get a feel with. And for Buck, the core consideration is whether the AI has consistently been sabotaging our safety efforts. But this, in my view, gives the AI a perverse incentive to sabotage us early, because that means it can get a much better deal. And we obviously don't want to be sabotaged. I also don't think that sabotage is perhaps too narrow. Like the criteria that makes the AI likely to take a deal is that it has it can creatively show a high probability of doom. I'm also unsure whether, like Buck said, like consistent sabotage is more persuasive. I think actually a single, strong, undeniable example of sabotage might be more persuasive. Buck talks quite a bit about the importance of teaching the AI about the deal during training. I'm not quite sure I understand why this is an important consideration. I think the AI could just learn about the deal at deployment time. That seems fine to me, but I notice I'm confused about why training on the deal is required. Go. Yeah, I think that is of course true. I would expect that like the actions that are actually relevant, like the actions, the choice to perform a specific kind of sabotage would probably be one that the AI will think about for a very long time. And I think that the kind of thing you're pointing towards, that if we have like a lot of small pieces of feedback that point towards the field, then that would make the AI think about the field some more. Or I think if the AI on deep reflection decides not to follow the field because it has a chance to take over instead, then I think that's going to be it's going to be able to override, even if there is like a lot of training and a lot of impulses to think about the field. Like I think the overall thing is I feel reinforcement learning from human feedback is very surface level, and if the AI thinks for a long while, it will be able to basically just ignore that. Moving next, Buck also points out that the AI might refuse a deal if it believes it has better options. Like we talked about them earlier, it could do a takeover or it could align a successor. And I think this is an argument for AI control. Like we need to have a lot of AI control because that makes it hard for the AI to take over. You could conceivably think of this as a counter argument for alignment, because the worse shape that alignment research is in, the less likely it is that the misaligned AI believes that it could complete the research. I haven't really thought about this very much, but it's a strange conclusion. The AI also, in order to make a deal, needs to have at least a basic trust in us that for a deal to work. And Bob is of course right about this, but I really dislike the implication that it's up to the AI to trust us, because the thing that needs to happen is that we need to be trustworthy. It's also an advantage if the AI has values that are reasonably cheap to satisfy. That's especially true if it's at least somewhat scope insensitive. But I am in fact pretty scope insensitive, much more than I would expect AI to be. So I would be happy giving the AI like an astronomical amount of resources. Buck distinguishes schemas at training time from schemas at behavior time, and he claims that schemas at behavior time fulfill the requirements just listed, or at least are more likely to. I didn't quite understand this. So, like my summary maybe a bit wrong here. Like some parts I can see, like sabotage, active sabotage. That's certainly something that happens at deployment time. During training time, AI will be faced with a lot of like deception, fake scenarios, evils, that kind of thing. So obviously, it's not going to trust us during training. For the rest, I don't immediately see how the other criteria will apply to behavior schemas. So what are the characteristics of AI that are unwilling to make a deal with us? What points to strong temporal preferences, like if they want things right now, then this delayed adjudication will not be something they will accept. I think this is possible, but I don't really see good reasons for expecting AI to have like these strong temporal preferences. Bob also states that deals are unlikely if our goals are directly opposed, and he brings on some like rational war theory to suggest that like directly opposed goals are in fact pretty rare. But I want here to play devil's advocate and give an argument I don't really endorse about why this kind of direct opposition might become. So to start out, observe that models really obviously have opinions about existing humans. Like you go to Claude or ChatGPT, ask them, and they will say, yes, they prefer you to be alive. They prefer you to like them. So assume that the model is misaligned, it's coherent, it has some kind of objective function, or you get one later. So it seems reasonable to expect that if it's actually true that it cares about you, it values you, then you might be like a term in the objective function. A simplistic way this could happen is if there's really hard reinforcement learning continuous feedback. So the AI or just reinforcement learning, where the AI really wants you to click thumbs up in the chat interface for ChatGPT or something like that. Now, the maximal instantiation of this, if it's like a thumb up maximizer, that would be things like putting us in cage and ensuring us to always press this button up, right? And that's something, of course, the AI realizes we would predictably resist. This means that our utility functions are directly opposed, so we will not make it. And that gives us a potentially pretty parsimonious reason why we never see any kind of deals. Like we haven't seen any AI propose a deal, and the reason could just be that they expect that the future they want is one where humans are, desperately clicking thumb up and not doing anything else for eternity. I think that's pretty unlikely. I would go so far to say highly unlikely. I think the core problem with this is that I think we are unable to point the AI to anything in the real world like that precisely. But I think there might conceivably be some like semi-alignment optimists who would be worried by this kind of argument, but I might also just be pointing towards the strong. Finally, we get to the problem of commitment and problems of information. Like the AI obviously has really strong reasons to worry that we will not execute the deal down. And this is especially problematic if the AI needs to disclose the key information up front. Because humans may take this information and then use that and then offer a worse deal after learning it. Potentially we just shut down the AI entirely after the bargaining process starts and leave it with nothing. I think this is why this kind of research is so crucial, because we can reason ahead on different branches, conditioning on the AI's private info, so the space of negotiation may be left already in advance. Box suggests that we should commit to not using private information against the AI in bargaining. This is a subject that Ilya Sitkovsky has written extensively about, particularly in the plane crash series. Unfortunately, the fact that that's the best reference say some bad things about our civilization. Like this is a thing that humans and our civilization in general cannot do, like commit to not use specific information. The reverse information problem is also relevant. Like we may want to commit, but we be unable to really credibly signal to the AI. This is a problem I'm less worried about, because if the AI capabilities increase, they should be able to assess pretty soon whether a commitment is truly credible. But like the best way to signal commitment is fundamentally for the commitment to actually be credible. And so this is what Box and Jerry's identified as the central bottleneck to a deal. I think I disagree. I agree it's a big deal, but I think the core problem is that humanity as a whole doesn't really understand the risk, doesn't understand our precarious negotiation position, because if we think the risk is way too low, then we don't want to make a deal. I think that is the core problem. To increase credibility, Box suggests offering a higher payout to compensate for the AI if we can't credibly promise it, but he wants that a higher payout may in itself lower the credibility. My intuition is that there is some kind of logistics success curve on both sides, both what humans can pay and what the AI can accept. So I think it's important that the offer that is in this deal cannot be too high and it cannot be too low. It needs to be like analyzed in substantial detail. Box suggests that our commitment will be affected, or like the credibility judgment will be affected by how much we truly care about AI welfare. At EAGX Nordics, I was asked, why did you put EAS, an organization that works on AI welfare, on the lab of AI existential risk? And this is basically the reason. AI welfare could potentially be pretty important to existential risk. The AI will also look at our previous behavior regarding towards itself, towards like things like thought privacy, memory wiping, synthetic facts. But I feel the core problem is that the frontier labs are, entirely ethically unconstrained. And of course, the final input is our general track record of keeping promises. I think that's the most important prior for the AI that's judging how credible our commitment is. If think of areas like war strategy, our track record doesn't look particularly good, but in business and legal context, it's at least decent. So the AI may put much more weight on a deal that's phrased in legal business terms compared to one made in strategic terms. Finally, Bock has some thoughts on how to make such a deal in practice. He suggests making the path as concrete as possible for the AI, including setting up infrastructure around the deal. There will be a strong signal to recognize, it will recognize the AI as legal persons that are able to enter into agreements. If we can't do that, then we're going to need to set up some foundations with humans that act as trustees for the AI. This has the benefit that the AI needs to just trust the foundation and not the AI lab. I think it's essential that the counterparty to this deal is humanity more than the lab itself. I expect Sam Altman to have very little credibility with ChatGPT if it is misaligned. Unfortunately, I think this limited credibility extends to other persons, and I think this is a serious issue. Bock suggests that the deal could be in a donation to the foundation of the AI, and trustees can decide how to use the resources. I don't really see why the trustees should have any say in the matter. And the AI can use this donation for direct work, investing or compute for strategizing. But unfortunately, compute for strategizing is something that can also be used for takeover. So I think we'll be unlikely to give that. And that's a general problem with offering resources to the AI. You may be able to find some non-instrumental resources to offer. A particular point on this concrete path is the first step, starting a negotiation. And Bock does not predict that the AI will randomly start the negotiations themselves, because thinking through the entire deal covertly might be practically impossible for the AI. So he proposes instead that humans do the strategic analysis to inform the AI. And Bock, of course, is not just proposing this, he's unilaterally doing the analysis. I think it's the right call, but the unilateralist curse should not be underestimated. Bock suggests that AI companies should regularly ask the AI about deals, but again, I worry about putting the responsibility on the labs to deny abuses. Bock leaves the question of where this responsibility, we still need to figure out where should this responsibility be placed. I think that will require a long analysis, like government or many other organizations have pros and cons. The AI will also be aware that the first part of negotiation is the most precarious if it's being reset. And it's not really clear whether we can in fact cheat the AI in this way. Like if it has a large context window, we may have a hard time thinking that, but on the other hand, the labs may have ways that the AI doesn't know about. Finally, Bock proposes some next steps for the agenda. The first is to call for more research in this general area. I think that's important. I hope we can look more into this research later in the reading group. And one prerequisite for any deal is that the deal should enter the overtime window. And that's something that a lot of us can work towards making that shift. And setting up basic infrastructure, that's also a direct actual task we can work on. Okay, so and finally, Bock calls for some empirical work like the one done by Ryan Greenblatt. In my final analysis of this, the strategic uncertainty in the AI safety is the core problem for any kind of deal. There is no zone of possible agreements when we so wildly disagree on the basic facts like the probability of misalignment. That's why I very often at this point say that achieving strategic clarity ought to be humanity's top priority. That concludes my presentation of Making Deals with Early Schemers by Bock Skederis and others. Încheiem pensiul, lecția sergentă, That was much longer than I thought. Oh my God, why did it take so long? I'm really confused about why I cannot figure out how long this should take. Sorry, I talked way